The sirens went off.
All the guests disappeared, they all shot off.
Oh, we'll have to cancel the honeymoon.
What's going to happen to the cake?
Oh, leave it, come on.
Oh.
I remember everyone came out in the street when the sirens went off. The noise, it was deafening. Well, we'd all been issued with gas masks, so I immediately thought we'd all be gassed. I was petrified. Phil, why haven't you got your gas mask with you?
All right, love, calm down.
No, for heaven's sake, Phil, just go and get it. It was the only time I ever lost my temper with him. Ooh, I was cross.
Of course, the next thing was all the children being evacuated. We stood on Molly Unstead's steps and we saw the train taking all the children with their little boxes off to the country. For Bernard, it was different.
My mother had a brother that lived in Jersey, and she thought it would be safer for me to be over there. So when the war broke out, off I went to Jersey on my own to be with my uncle. Well, nothing happened for ages, did it? It was the phony war. So in June 1940, my uncle, he went back to England to talk to my mother about bringing me back home. What he didn't know was that the Germans were just about to invade, and that his was the last boat out. So he was stuck in England and drafted into the army. I was stuck in Jersey with a horrible aunt who'd lost an husband and gained a nephew she didn't want. The following year, she put me in this orphanage. We was completely isolated and half-starved by the Germans. I had to stay there until 1945.
It was a long time for the children to be away from home. And a lot of parents thought, well, if we're going to die, we'll all go together. So after a year or two, some of the children came back, like June Neal and her sister, from number 22.
Yeah, we've been evacuated to Bexhill, and then we came back to London in 1941. We went over to our old school, but had no windows in it. They'd all been blown out. So what you do, you go to other people's houses, and the teacher would come and she'd teach you there. Now, one day when I was about 10, I was just coming out of my lessons, and we saw these German planes flying really low. Now, the boy I was with, he started waving to them because he thought they were British. But me and the girl I was with, we had the sense to lie down because we realised they was German. Well, we were all right, but those planes flew onto Sandhurst Road School in Catford, and they bombed all the children and their teachers coming out of school. Their grave is in Hither Green. It's a great big, massive grave it is. I've seen it. 5, 6, 7 years old they were.
Bill got his call-up papers for the Navy in October 1940.
I'd done my training in Plymouth. They needed sailors all the time, so within 12 weeks we was at sea, we were so in demand. My first ship was the HMS Gardenia. I was away for nearly a year. Our run was from Gibraltar to West Africa and back.
I was living back at Mum's at the time because I just had my first child, a lovely little girl, Annette. Well, Mum had had a phone put in, quite rare in those days, and sometimes Bill would be able to ring me.
Look, I can't tell you where I'm going because I don't know myself yet. I just know I'm off somewhere because my name's been piped up in Chatham.
From the shores of Montezuma to the wilds of Timbuktu, there's an ever-spreading rumour about a sailor with eyes of blue. He causes great commotion with his eyes that match the ocean. He's listed in the nautical who's who. Who's got girls in every port hanging around like flies. Yo ho 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 ho, the sailor with the navy blue eyes. Who's the guy they love to buy dozens of socks and ties? Yo ho 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 ho, the sailor with the navy blue eyes. When the boat comes home after crossing the foam, he's still at sea, thinking or wondering, who's he gonna take a rowing on the lake? Who's the boy who's full of joy, waving the most goodbyes? Yo ho, ho! The sailor with the navy blue eyes. The sailor with the navy blue, sailor with the navy blue,
The sailor with the navy blue eyes.
That first year, Bill was away the whole time. But after that, he came home on leave every 9 weeks. No, we didn't have very long together, maybe a weekend or something, but it was quite romantic, really. And he looked so gorgeous in his uniform.
We usually sailed into Chatham. Now, I knew Oliver and her mum were short on rations at home, so I managed to smuggle out 2 big packs of bacon from the stores. All sailors have got these loose trousers, haven't they? Someone wrapped one round each ankle. You should have seen the look on Olive's face.
Oh! When Bill first came home on leave, he wouldn't go into the shelter.
I found the air raids very difficult.
Well, we'd got used to the sirens going off, and we knew by the sound of the planes overhead when it was really dangerous. But when the ack-ack guns on the railway went off, and the batteries on the common started, it was deafening, and Bill would say,
I feel worse in London than I do at sea. Well, at least when I'm in the Navy, I've got something to hit them back with, haven't I? I'm a gunner. Here, I'm just stuck in that ruddy shelter all night.
my mum had a brick shelter in our back garden, because it wasn't big enough for an Anderson shelter. It had a concrete roof just a few inches above your head, and it would drip with condensation.
And if you couldn't stand it in that tiny space, you go to the big shelter under the high street, which had proper bunks. Sometimes there'd be at least 50 people down there.
Everyone was nice to one another. We'd all have a cup of tea or something.
And mostly when you went down there, you didn't sleep. You'd chat. Sometimes you'd have a good old sing-song.
Pack up all my caravelle, here I go, singing low.
Bye, bye, blackbird. When somebody waits for me, sugar sweet, so is she. Bye, bye, blackbird.
And no one here can love and understand me.
Oh, what hard luck stories they all hand me.
Make my bed and light the light. I'll arrive late tonight. Blackbird, bye, bye.
Bill, over there, isn't that Lily Avery from number 14?
Yeah.
And what happened to her, didn't you?
No, what?
Well, before the war, she was working as a chambermaid up in one of those boarding houses in Bloomsbury Square. Quite the bottle blonde she was. Anyway, this foreign man was staying there, and I can just see him now in his black coat, his Homburg hat and his spats. Yeah, that's what struck me, these spats. Anyway, he took quite a shine to Lily.
Lily, I would like to give you lots of money so you can stop all of this working. And then you can stop at home and come with me in my motor car. And I should be delighted to take you on some trips.
Oh! He had a furriers, a big warehouse in the East End. And Lily, well, she'd be dressed up to the nines in these flashy dresses and fur stoles.
Hello, hello!
Well, everyone thought they were going to get married, and Lily was over the moon, because it would have been a big step up for her.
Today we shall drive to the coast. Yeah, we shall go to Portsmouth.
Oh, it was usually Portsmouth. Yeah, she told me he was always taking photographs of her with the ships in the background.
It's good, yeah, hold it there. And say cheese.
Cheese!
Good, good. Shoo. Now, watch the birdie. Shoo.
No, I'm over here.
Oh, yeah. Shoo.
Well, this went on for a while, and then I think it was when Hitler was getting big over there. Well, he didn't come anymore.
Oh, look!
Oh! She went over to his warehouse, but it was completely empty. And he'd gone. Disappeared.
What, you mean?
Yeah. It must have been a spy.
Sometimes you'd be in the shelter all through the night. Then in the morning, that bloke on the radio, Lord Haw-Haw, he'd say something like,
You can come out of your holes now.
and I'd go back to my ship.
And I wouldn't see him again for weeks. He's just got on with your everyday lives. That's all you could do.
Mr. Wu is now an air raid warden. And don't he look cute in his new siren suit. He goes round every night to make the blackout sure. If you've got a light at your window, you'll have one round at your door.
You had to keep your windows covered, no light showing. The warden would come round and shout,
"Put that light out!"
You put up black cloths or heavy curtains over the windows.
Hey, up those railings will have to go.
Well, they asked everyone to give up their railings for the war effort. You didn't have a choice.
His headquarters, it's plain, down by Lover's Lane. He goes there every evening after dark. He shines his torch into the dark, and the girls all cover their laundry mark. Mr. Woo's an air raid warden now. Turn out nice again.
A couple of years into the war, they started calling up the women. My very good friend, Pat Greenfield from number 4, she joined the Women's Army, the ATS.
I chose the army because my mother was from an army family. Now, I did my basic training in Warrington. It was very tough. First posting was Gravesend. I worked in the command post as a telephonist and a plotter. Now, information about enemy planes, such as height and distance, came over the phone, and you had to pass it on. Now, my fiancé, Les, he was in the Navy, and he wanted a photograph of me in my uniform, so I had one done especially at Jerome's of Woolwich. Had a copy made for my parents, and they framed that on their mantelpiece. They were so proud of me, a corporal in the army. And Les kept my photo with him all through the war.
You'd write to one another all the time they were away, hoping it'd get through. Darling Bill, missing you terribly. Little Annette's doing this and I'm doing that. Of course, you didn't tell them what was really happening. You didn't want to worry them. Longing for you to come back so we can start our lives again. All my love, Olive. I wish that I could hide inside this letter and seal me up and send me out to you. What a surprise in store, they'd bring me to your door. I'd pop right out and kiss you like you've never been kissed before.
We'd be so happy we would cry together, and then we'd laugh the way we used to do. I wish that I could hide inside this letter and seal me up and send me out to you.
One day I was just posting a letter to Bill at 12 o'clock. And do you know that same day at 1 o'clock, a V2 fell right by that post office, blew up the church, destroyed half the high street. Well, I was already back home when it happened, but we still felt the explosion.
Thursday the 8th of March, 1945 it was. I was amazed at all the damage. We were 2 or 3 streets away from where it fell, but there was rubble, broken glass everywhere.
One of the huge cornerstones of the church was just lying across the pavement. I couldn't believe it had been thrown so far.
All my windows had been blown out, and when I opened my front door, there were dead birds on the floor inside.
When I think, if I'd been posting that letter just an hour later...
Oh, those V2s, they did such terrible damage. And we were so close to the end of the war as well.
Yeah, in another couple of months it'd all be over.
The best journey I ever had was that journey back home, having been in Jersey for 5 years. Mr. Runstead was working at the station as a porter. When I got off the train, he recognised me. And he took me back down the street, and everybody was there to greet me. I hadn't seen my parents for 5 years.
We all knew the end of the war was near. We couldn't wait to celebrate.
We had a great street party. Somebody brought out a piano and started playing all the old songs.
The blackouts were taken down, but there were lights on in every window.
And Mrs. Greenfield had sung Welcome Home on a big sheet for all the soldiers.
We was up nearly all the night.
It was wonderful to have everyone back together.
Come and make eyes at me, down at me, on Moorland Bush. La 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 la. Come, for drink some more wine with me, down at me, on Moorland Bush. Hear the little German band, la 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 la. Just let me hold your hand, dear. Do you? Come and let me walk it down, on Moorland Bush, bush, bush.
A lot of the men were demobbed when the German war ended. But my Bill was away for another year after that. But the day he came home, well, that's when our lives began again.
I was so glad to be home. I never wanted to move again. And you know, we stayed on that street for another 50 years.
When you look back, we was like one big family on our street. That's probably why I didn't marry any of the girls down there. Doris, Olive, Doreen, Molly. They were more like sisters to me.
I moved away with Frank after the war, but, well, I still come back and visit even now.
I moved away as well when I got married, but I couldn't keep away from the place. No. Well, I still got family down there. My mother still lived on the street, didn't she? And I'll tell you, if they changed anything down the street, I'd say, oi, what a cheek! They've interfered with our playground. It's our playground.
Yeah, I know.
So pretty without the trees.
Oh, it's just the same, really.
When I go down there now, I'll tell you what it does for me. When I go past the houses, I name all the people who lived there and what happened there.
Life wasn't easy, but everyone did their best and, well, there was a lot of love. What more could you want?
I had a wonderful childhood in that street. Well, for me, it's always been a romantic place.
We had a great life there.
Love is just like a song. We'll drift along without a sweet refrain together.
And when we're getting old and grey, dear,
We'll wander in the same old way, dear sweet.